Good afternoon and welcome back everyone to the Stardust Festival. Up next, we have Daniel Shilton. He is an Airbus Business Development Director for Space based in Ottawa. Prior to joining Airbus, he was responsible for business development of several space programs, both at MDA and SSL in the US. In 1998, he also attended the International Space University summer session. He has a master's degree in mechanical engineering at the University of Twente in the Netherlands. With that, I'd like to welcome Daniel to the stage.
Hello, everybody. I hope everybody is having a great time in Cochrane. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. Hopefully, we'll manage to do that next year. I thought I'll tell you a little bit about my journey in space, or my journey in the space domain. I haven't been to space myself. From early school to my position right now, and hope you find that interesting and inspiring. And I'll finish off with a couple of lessons or tips, 3 tips that my observations of what I've seen so far in my career. And I'm counting on your questions, because if you don't ask any questions, then it's going to be a very short presentation. So think about anything that you'd like me to ask. We'd be keen to answer all your questions. So I'll start with where I already you already heard during the introduction that I didn't grow up in Canada. I grew up in the Netherlands and was born and raised there in a fairly rural area. A lot of farming and agriculture around me. Not a lot of high tech. Space was not really anywhere in sight when I was doing high school, other than what you would see on TV. Then from high school went on to university, studied mechanical engineering. Again, space was not really on my mind at that time. Did a lot of other things, like working on solar-powered race cars, and did my practical work in Australia on finite element modeling of masonry. Totally not related to space at all. But space came into the picture when I started my graduation thesis at a company called Fokker Space Systems in the Netherlands, in Leiden. And later on, a few years later, that company became part of Airbus. There I worked on modeling simulation of the deployment of solar arrays. And these solar arrays, they are folded like a harmonica on the side of a spacecraft. And they need to deploy once the satellite arrives its orbit. And that system needs to be light, but at the same time sturdy enough to survive the launch loads and survive the shock that goes through the whole system when the system is deployed and the hinges latch. It's a very complex problem to model. It's all non-linear, flexible, multiple systems linked to each other. And you need a large computational model to do that. This is a very interesting problem, and I like doing that. It was a great way to apply some of the knowledge acquired in mechanical engineering into a space topic. After that, the company where I did this graduation thesis asked me to stay on, and I got employed by Fokker Space Systems and worked on the European robotic arm. Yes, there is more than one robotic arm, not just the Canadian arm, but also a European robotic arm, which was delivered to the Russians a few years ago and is now on the Russian segment of the International Space Station. There, similar problem, long system, non-linear movements, flexible, needed to be simulated in order to predict what its behavior would be once it is in space. Got to do a whole lot of different things there as well, and got an opportunity to move into project management and subcontract management. Went to International Space University in Cleveland, the summer session. And then in 2000 moved to Canada. I joined MDA and had an interview with them, and they said, well, we don't know what you will be doing, but it will be interesting. Are you game? So I said yes, and moved to Canada from the Netherlands. Ended up doing business development, project management, program management. Worked in Germany, worked in Palo Alto. I worked on various, mostly Earth observation type projects. Highlight was obviously working in Germany on the Rapid Eye program, where we designed and built 5 optical spacecraft that were delivered to the German company called Rapid Eye. And then about a year ago, I made a switch to Airbus Defence and Space in Canada, in Ottawa, and am now managing their space file and working on various collaborations between Airbus Canada and Canadian industry, my colleagues in Europe, going after opportunities both in Canada and in Europe together. Throughout the years, my experience is that in the space world, and I can't claim that this is unique to the space industry, but I think it is a little bit. You meet a lot of very good people. You're allowed to work on very interesting problems. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes the projects are very long. But I always think back of when these projects that if it was easy, then anybody could do it. And this was a phrase from my father when I was complaining about something that would happen at work. So here you have a little bit of an overview of what I have been up to in the past 20 years or so. I wanted to finish up with, before we go to questions, with maybe 3 observations, lessons, or maybe pieces of advice that I would like to share with you that might be helpful or insightful. The first one is there are many paths to working in the space domain. Mine was through mechanical engineering and deploying that knowledge and into a space problem. But I'm surrounded by electrical engineers, software engineers, physicists, chemical engineers, aerospace engineers. A whole range of engineering can find a way to deploy that knowledge into a space program. So as you are at the point of decide what you want to study and you're interested in space, don't worry too much about what you study. Study what you enjoy, and then you'll find a way to deploy that knowledge into a space situation, one way or the other. And the same applies for non-technical studies. I've worked with economists, lawyers, physicists as well. There are many ways to find a way to work in the space domain. The second thing I wanted to share with you was space is a fairly small world. I meet people that I've worked with 20 years ago, and they remember, and I remember them, what we did together and how we work together and what we do. So as you work into the space field, be nice to everybody. There is a good chance that you will be working with that person 10 years, 15 years from now on some other project. And at the same time, you can also use that to find connections, introductions, information that will help you to do your work. So it's a small world, smaller than most industries probably. And the third piece that I would like to share with you is if you can, look for people that are interested in coaching and mentoring you. Through my career in space, I found a few people that took an interest to furthering the the, the people's careers that they and the people that would report to them, and help them on their way to bigger assignments, bigger projects, and so I remember one of my bosses mentioned when I joined that company. He said, "Well, I work for you." And I said, "No, you got that wrong. I work for you." And he said, "No, um, my job is to provide you with the tools, the information, the authority to make sensible decisions and do your work. And if I help you do that, and I do that with a few other people, I achieve a lot more than you delivering information to me for me to make decisions. After all, you have to do the work. If you can find those people in your career, try to work with them. Um, this will this will greatly advance your career." So, with that, yeah, hopefully you have a little bit of an overview of what I've been up to into space and what I've observed, and hopefully that's might be helpful for you. And I would be very keen to see if there are any questions. I think we'll have to use the chat channel for that, um, and um, and would be very happy to answer them.
Great. Thank you so much for your talk. So yeah, as Daniel mentioned, if you are watching us on YouTube or Facebook, please go to the Stardust Alliance or Stardust Technologies pages to share your comments there so I can get them. But we do have a question here. So you talked about some of these mentors and how they're really important, but how does a young person find this person and approach them and create that relationship?
Oh, that's a great question. I would my advice, and I'm using that word deliberately, is to test that by seeing how people respond to your request to when you ask for advice. So when you approach somebody, don't ask people for a job or a co-op or position, etc. Ask, what would you advise me to do? And the people that I described will engage in that stage, and they will first try to get to know you, try to figure out what you're interested in, how that matches with their priorities, and then figure out with you a path to put that into practice. So uh, that will be my advice: is to ask for advice, and the response that you will get will tell you what type of person you're dealing with.
Yeah, no, that's really great. Um, because yeah, you don't know until you actually go and try and ask different people. And in that same area with mentorship, because sometimes you have people placed in front of you who are your teachers or your employers, but what about for people who maybe don't have that access or the resources to people in the field of space or fields they're interested in? Are there communities or places where they can find people that can help them?
So I have seen people, and I mean, it requires a little bit of an investment of time, and sometimes a little bit, of course, practical things like money. But conferences like this, I mean, nowadays things are there are lots of virtual events as well. It is very I wouldn't say easy, but if you attend a conference, you you can do what I just described and approach somebody after a talk and saying, "I thought it was interesting, and I'd like to have your advice on this." Virtually, I have seen people using LinkedIn as a method uh, to contact people and to do the same thing. And as always, when you use LinkedIn, make it always a personal message and saying, "I have seen you talk at this event and I'd like to know more about this," rather than just click the button of connect, because then as soon as there is a message in there, then it's the start of a conversation.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. We heard some other people talking about too how they get lots of LinkedIn connections, but then no one follows up with the message. So that part is really important for all the students and young people out there to go ahead and then try and start the conversation also.
Another thing is worth thinking about, is there are grants and scholarships for attending these types of conferences, which is a great thing to do, because if you apply for those, it you get experience in applying for these types of sponsorships as well. Typically, it gives you an entry to whoever is funding those scholarships, and then you got a chance to attend in person an event, which you can, of course, use to your benefit in many different ways.
Yeah, that's really great advice, and hopefully we can get some more people up here in Cochrane next year as well. We're really eager to have uh, everyone in person as well. So a question about your personal journey moving to a different country, to a different continent. I guess, how did you make that decision, or what was your biggest worry with that, and that could maybe help others when they're facing some sort of really grand decision that they're unsure about how to tackle?
Um, yes, so those are big decisions, and you'll have a couple of sleepless nights about it. Um, and I had those as well. My thought is here is that um, typically people that are willing to take the risk of these things, and I think actually the risk of those moves is smaller than than it's typically perceived. Uh, People that take those risks are rewarded in more than not just monetary way, but are rewarded in being able to do things that that otherwise they would not get a chance to do. So uh, my my advice is to say is to really think about, is this risk really that big of going there? And if it doesn't work out, would you then not just move back and continue from where you were at your original spot in some way? Um, Currently, across the world, I would say, especially companies, I mean, I don't have as much visibility in the academic world. Companies are screaming for talent, and talent that is willing to uproot itself and go somewhere else and go to a new environment. That says a lot about that person, and willing to learn new things, to take risks, and contribute to new organizations. So I'd say when you have those big decisions, do it.
Awesome, that's great advice. Just go with it and see what happens. Awesome. All right. Well, with that, I would like to thank you, Daniel, for joining us today. And yeah,
You're
thank
very
you so much.
welcome. And well, let's see how many people will follow up with a LinkedIn message.
Yes, exactly. Not just the connection, a message also. All right. Thanks so much, Daniel.
You're very welcome. Have a great conference.
Thank you. All right, everyone. We will be back at 2:45 with our next speaker, Joe Cassidy.
Can you hear me? No. Let's see.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right, great. Did you have any slides to share?
Yes.
All right, we can get those going and then we can begin.
Okay, I'm click the share button down here.
Yeah, and I'll take care of the rest. All right, everybody, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Joe Cassidy. He is the Executive Director for Space Programs in the Washington, D.C. operations for Aerojet Rocketdyne, where he helps oversee strategy development and architectures for future space and launch systems. His current interest areas include architectures for human missions to Mars, space mobility and logistics, and space debris remediation. We're really happy to have Joe here join us today.
Hi. I'm just getting my slides here, so give me a second and I should be able to get those uploaded to you. There we go. Open. Okay. I think they're coming your way there if I click the right. All right. Well, thanks everybody. It's great to be here with you. I was just going to share a little bit about my career and how I came to be doing. Oh, and of course, my cat decided to join us. She likes to be on all the calls with me. Did they come through there, Madison? Oh, this is Fluffy the cat. Hello, Fluffy. All right, so I'll jump right in here. So I talked before with a couple of the organizers about what to say, and I thought I'd just share with you kind of the story of how sometimes you start off down one path, you think you know what you're going to do, and life takes you in different directions. And so I chose to title the talk "Bumpy Roads Lead to Beautiful Places." And this picture, I'll just say one thing about it for the title slide. This is actually a picture taken from a condo that my mother owned in Titusville, Florida. And if you look real carefully under the P and the Y in Bumpy, that's actually looking across the river toward the VAB at Kennedy Space Center. And that was a dawn taken from her condo one morning. We used to get up and look at all the activity going on over there. So that was where I was going to start. Is really my mom was my inspiration and the whole reason that I'm doing what I do today and ever got into the space business, really. Yeah, I can't say enough about what that meant to me, how much she's still there with me, even though she passed away a few years back in 2019. You can just see in these pictures, she was super involved. And when I was born in 1959, it was right about the time NASA was getting started too. And I can remember my earliest memories were back in the days before Apollo, even for the Gemini and even probably some Mercury program launches, although I was pretty small still then. I'm not sure I really remember them. But she would always stop whatever was going on, sit me down in front of the TV, the old black and white TV, and we would watch those launches and those missions. And that carried on right to these days that are shown on this chart here, where she would go to visit the Kennedy Space Center, and she knew probably more astronauts than I do, and spent a lot of time down there helping promote what was happening in the space program. She was just super involved. There was two things in her life: the space program and her Mustangs. So that's why I included the little picture there of the Mustang. But yeah, she was a super lady and really set me on the course that I eventually stayed on. I didn't exactly go in a straight line though. So I thought I'd share also with you that I, like many teenagers, I probably wasn't quite ready to go and do the things that my mom thought I should do and knew how to do. And so I didn't exactly start off and know from day one that I was going to do what I'm doing today. So I got out of high school. I like to play tennis. I got a tennis scholarship to college in Indiana. Grew up in Indiana, and so I just kind of was doing that. And I still took some physics courses. I had a general interest in science and astronomy, especially, and so I kind of did that for a while, and I thought, this doesn't seem like I'm really doing the right thing. So then I left there, went to a branch campus of Purdue, really, in the Indiana University and Purdue University in Indianapolis. And I lived at home for a while, took some more math and general engineering courses, and got rid of the cat. And then I went to I started looking around and I thought, okay, I think I want to be an astronomer. So I looked around at programs to do astronomy and visited some of those out west, ended up at the University of Arizona, and kept the physics kind of background. I was majoring in engineering physics. But the best part of that was when I was there, I worked at the planetarium that's shown there. And that was really an eye opener for me because I could actually kind of rub elbows with some of the grad students that were working in astronomy and some of even the postdocs and the actual researchers, and kind of helped me to learn what astronomy was really all about, not just the academic part, but the actual working part. And I think that steered me in the direction that I ended up in, which was, you know what, I should get my act together, go back and major in engineering. And that's how I ended up back at Purdue in Indiana, and I majored in aeronautics and astronautics at Purdue. So, as I say, you don't always know where you're going when you start out, but if you keep kind of an eye on what your passions are and what you throughout all of that, I knew I wanted to do something with space. I just didn't know exactly what that something was. So a couple of other influences that were there kind of at that time. One of them that was definitely a big influence on me was Carl Sagan. And I've always had kind of an interest in Mars also. And I think that's because of Carl Sagan. And, he was involved, as is shown here, the picture there with the Viking landers, which landed on Mars when I was in high school. Was kind of like the next big thing that happened in space after the Apollo missions. And I just thought, wow, this is so cool. We can send things to this other planet and see pictures coming back. The planet kind of looks like our planet in a lot of ways. But not just that, it was also that Carl Sagan was a guy who could talk to people just like, about what he did and convey the enthusiasm and the wonder of it all. And I put a couple of his quotes on here, that I felt were super inspirational to me. The other picture there is he would go on places like The Tonight Show, which was just like, general popular talk show, and talk about this stuff. And I thought, wow, that is super cool. So he really helped to kind of steer me in the path of, I want to do engineering, I want to do science, but I also want to be a person who can tell people about it and help them understand why we do this stuff. Why is it important for us to go out and explore the solar system and the universe? So the next big change that came along as I got back into engineering, I was working away on my degree, still didn't really know exactly how I was going to get where I wanted to go. But a really significant political event happened in the United States around that time, and that was Ronald Reagan got elected president. A lot of people were worried about this because he was kind of known as, maybe a guy who would do something a little, provocative or crazy in terms of how we were involved with at that time, the Soviet Union. And tensions were pretty high in that time frame in like the early 80s. But what really happened was interesting. Because of him getting elected, he kind of followed through with a policy that led to a lot of activity in the space engineering world. And that was what we knew as the Strategic Defense Initiative, also known as Star Wars. And the idea of Star Wars was we were going to put up a shield in space that no matter how many nuclear missiles the Soviets had, we could knock them down. And it would basically be a defensive shield that was impenetrable. And the concepts and the devices that were being talked about, I just showed a couple here. Basically, beamed energy weapons or defensive weapons, a shield that would knock down missiles, lasers in space, and they all relied on one thing. That's shown over there on the right of this slide in the little sketch. That little triangular thing that looks kind of like an umbrella opening up. That was a nuclear power source that would put out megawatts of power to power these big devices. And what was good for me is I was interested in a new type of plasma propulsion. And I really wanted to work and do research on that. But of course, it needed power. And so that was the advantage of this whole program coming along, was those things needed power. And so did my thruster. So it was great for me. This technology started getting more and more developed. And there was a big push to do work in this area. So with that big push came a lot of funding. And at one point I was at Purdue. I really wanted to do this, but I didn't think that the school or the professor that I was working with would really be interested in having me do that. So I walked into my professor's office with an idea. I had been talking to some guys that were at a lab the Air Force had out in Edwards Air Force Base in California. And I went in to tell my professor that I wanted to do a master's degree working with them and doing my research out there. And I thought he would just say, that's something that we don't do here. Thanks, good idea, but maybe you can find someone else who'd be interested in having you do that. And as I went into the speech and started telling him what I was hoping to do, he jumped up from behind his desk, grabbed my hand, he shook my hand, and he said, "Boy, would I like to have you do that." So I didn't realize at the time, but just before I got to his office, he'd gotten a call from the head of the Air Force Office of Scientific Research, and this whole Star Wars initiative was causing them to want to get more people involved in this technology for these plasma propulsion devices, because they needed to have them to move these big platforms around in space and put them where they needed them to be. So I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And that's another kind of lesson learned, is if you pursue your passion, if you're true to what you really believe in, moments like that will happen. They'll come along. You put yourself in the right place. There's also another saying that I really like, and that is, you make your own luck. If you really work hard and you keep persevering, things like this happen to you. And so when that happened, I was able then to do exactly that. I was able to go to Edwards Air Force Base, build a lab out there, build one of these plasma propulsion thrusters, which at the time, I had read about. I had done some fundamental kind of background research on. And one of the other things is I met some of the guys from other labs who were working on these things, and they were really helpful. They were great mentors to me, and they helped me to understand and build these things, that basically I had only ever. And so it was almost like, I had to pinch myself to believe that I was really doing this. But we did the test. We were successful. I was able to get my master's degree in this field. And then that led to me getting a job in industry that basically was, kind of like on the ground floor of this new propulsion technology. So, it really came down to just continuing to pursue this passion, not giving up, I was going to tell one other story. When I got back to Purdue after all my other wanderings around, I can remember taking it, I don't remember the class exactly, but it was not specifically in my propulsion major. It was just another engineering course that we had to have as a requirement. And I remember getting my first test back, and I think I got something like a 15 or a 16 on the test, and that wasn't out of 100. And I just thought, what am I doing here? Do I really belong here? I wasn't alone. This guy was a notoriously hard professor, and he liked to scare first. I did get out of that course. I can't remember what grade I got. I'm sure it wasn't very good, but I survived it. But the thing is, you'll have those moments too, and that's kind of the whole idea of the bumpy roads. It's not always smooth. It's not like, hey, I'm going to do this and everything is always going to be great. It's kind of like, I'm going to do this no matter what. And when I encounter those bumps, I'm going to figure out a way to, just keep pushing forward and get through them. And when I get to the other side, then I'm going to realize, that I've made the progress I make. So same kind of thing here. I did this research. We developed this thruster. We were thinking, hey, this is going to be great. We have all this power from these Star Wars devices. Well, what happened next was Star Wars got canceled. The Soviet Union collapsed. We didn't need those big things in space, and so this whole technology kind of went away. But I was fortunate enough to get a job with a company up in Seattle that wanted to develop it for this kind of technology for other reasons. But instead of being multi-megawatt power type stuff, it was a few kilowatts of power. So we did it on commercial satellites at much lower power. And over the years, from the early 80s through today, we've flown all these different devices you can see here. And I was lucky enough to manage a couple of programs that actually went from, basically the very conceptual stage of, hey, we think we could do this, to actually building and testing the hardware and then putting it on a launch vehicle and flying it into space. And that's just such an awesome experience to be able to go through and do that kind of stuff. So, but it was only possible because of all those other things that had happened to me earlier on in my life and my career. So today, what we're doing, and this is really fun and exciting, kind of like spent, all these years, 30 plus years now working in the same technology. And we've done a lot of really good stuff with it at lower powers. We're finally getting back up to the high power. And then you can see the picture on this chart kind of looks like that one picture of my thruster I did for my master's degree. We call it the blue glow. And it's basically a plasma made from xenon propellant. And we use it we basically accelerate the xenon after we ionize it out really fast out of the thruster. And that gives us really good ISP, which is like a spacecraft measurement of gas mileage. So we can move things over really long distances. And what we're going to do with this is we're actually on a mission called the Power and Propulsion Element, which is going to get launched with another habitat called the Halo. And those two pieces are the first two pieces of a gateway that NASA is going to have, which is kind of like a small space station that's going to go into orbit around the moon. And the way it's going to get to that orbit is we're going to do it with these electric propulsion thrusters. So this is kind of like a dream come true for me too. It's like the culmination of everything, where we're finally going to use electric propulsion at power levels that are getting back up to 50 or 60 kilowatts of power to push really big things out around in space and move them between the Earth and the moon. So it'll be the first time that a solar electric propulsion system has ever moved a spacecraft that size out of one planet's orbit and put it into orbit around another body, in this case, the moon. And then at the same time, I'm getting a chance to do some things that I really never even thought I'd do, which is work on the big engines that are going to launch astronauts back to the moon. So these engines you see in the background of this picture are actually the first 4 RS-25 engines that are mounted on the SLS launch vehicle that right now is down in that same VAB that I showed you across the river in that first picture. And it's going to roll out to the pad here on the 18th of August. And if all goes well and the weather cooperates and we don't have any last minute scrubs, we're going to launch it to the moon on the 29th of August, so the end of this month. So those engines will be used to lift off the ground along with 2 big solid rocket boosters, and we'll send the Orion capsule on its way to the moon. It won't have any people on it this time. It's just an uncrewed test flight, but it'll have a lot of instrumentation. We're getting all the engineering data we need to ensure that the system is safe to put crew on for the next launch. And then the last thing, I'm here in Washington, D.C. I get to do a lot of things in terms of trying to help the people that make the policies that help charter the course for where we're going. And that comes back to the whole thing with Mars. I really try to make our politicians and our policymakers understand, again, why is it so important that we go to Mars? Why do we need to send people there? Why is that something that our country and our friends in Canada and in Europe, around the world, think is important to do? And the big thing for me is I believe that it helps us to, one, understand better who we are. Exploration is something that's sort of in our DNA, going all the way back to the earliest days. We always wanted to know what was over the next hill, and I think we still do. And right now, the next hill is Mars. So we're going to go back to the moon in just a few years. We're going to use that to teach us the things we need to know to get ready to go to Mars. And then hopefully in the next decade, in the 2030s, we're going to start that journey over that hill and head to Mars. So I'll stop there and take any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you so much for that talk. Here, let me get rid of that. There we go. All right, so a few questions. One, well, first of all, that must be so exciting to be working now on the engines going back to the moon. Just through the bumpy road, coming back to that this whole journey must be really exciting. I liked one of the things that you talked about, how at the start with Carl Sagan, and that you love engineering and science and communication. Can you maybe share with some of our younger audience members about that there are other pathways into this field that are not purely engineering or purely science, other important skills that can help them succeed in this field?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that I see more and more is it takes all kinds of things to make this a success. And we do have, even in our company and on the team that's working on this project now to go back to the moon and on to Mars, we have communications professionals, people who, majored in journalism and things like that. We have folks who are specialists in other types of fields, like marketing, and there's just so many ways to be involved. And so you don't have to be an engineer or a scientist. And then, some of the people that have been on the projects I've been involved in over the years got to be sort of, they were involved in the project as an engineer, but they didn't even have a degree in engineering. So sometimes just your life lessons, the things, if you start out as someone who works for a company or a university and gets involved in these projects, over the years, you accumulate so much just knowledge through working on the programs about, the intricacies and the ways that things get done, that you can become a vital person for, getting those kinds of projects done without having a degree in engineering. So there are a lot of ways to get into it, but definitely, I think we need the STEM field folks. We need the arts. That's the other thing. You know, the STEAM. I really like that you guys have it as the STEAM kind of overall umbrella, because, you know, one of the ways, the best ways to communicate, all the missions we do, the thing that sticks with people the most is the beautiful images. And I think, you know, that's going to be something, even as we send humans to Mars, people who can capture those images, artists and poets, you know, people who can tell humanity about the experience in a way that people that are engineers aren't usually that good at.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely great. I'm glad you brought up the STEAM aspect of it, including the arts along with all of the other fields, because that is something we're really trying to help expose everyone to, that everyone really can contribute to space in some way.
Yeah.
And with that, I'd like to thank you for being here with us today. We're just coming to the end of the time. So
All right.
yeah, it was really great. Thank you.
All right. Good luck to you all. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, everyone. So that concludes our live stream on this channel for today. Just as a reminder, if you head to our other stream at 4 p.m. Eastern, we do have Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen joining us. And we look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you.